Welcome to the SPED 533 tutorial for administering of the Woodcock-Johnson 3rd edition assessment. The Woodcock-Johnson measures many aspects of academic achievement through a wide variety of relatively brief tests. These measurements include general intellectual abilities, specific cognitive abilities, oral language, academic achievement. For the purpose of this video, we will be using the Woodcock-Johnson test of achievement, which includes assessments for reading, oral language, mathematics, written language, and supplemental. There are 22 tests in the Woodcock-Johnson 3rd edition entirely. Tests 1 through 12 are in one book, and 13 through 22 are in the second. There are two versions, Form A and Form B. For the purpose of this video, we will be using Test Form A of the Test of Achievement test. The 8 assessments used for this video, for the purpose of this video, and for the purpose of this course of SPED 533 signature assignment were letter word identification, reading fluency, passage comprehension, story recall, understanding directions, calculations, math fluency, and spelling. Within the booklet, each test is indicated on a tab. It is the responsibility of the examiner to administer the test in the order that they appear within the easel test booklet. All tests are organized to alternate tasks demanded of the student. It's also the responsibility of the examiner to ensure that they have all appropriate materials needed for the completion of the Woodcock-Johnson assessment, which include the test book easel, the test record booklet for the examiner to use, and the student response booklet. All three should have matching versions. Test Form A, Test Form A, Test Form A. Also, it is the responsibility of the examiner to start at the appropriate grade level. So for the purpose of this course, the student that was assessed was a 7th grade student. So I would go to the first test, which was letter word identification. The first page has, the first page after the tab provides special instructions, and those that are in blue are to be read by the examiner for the student. So for this student, 7th grade, I'd begin at item 49, and the correct page to begin would be page 27. Therefore, as the examiner, I would turn to page 27, which is where I would begin. It is also the responsibilities of the examiner to complete the student identification information before beginning the assessment. That is located on the test recording booklet on the front cover. This information can be filled and completed before giving the assessment. And prior to the end of the test, the observation checklist should be filled out at the end, before the end, or by the end of the examination is completely given. And this checklist includes observations that were made based on the student's level of proficiency, their cooperation, their attention and concentration, as well as confidence, their ability to respond, and then whether or not they had difficulty in responding. It is important for the examiner to not sit directly across from the student because the examiner will need to point to the tests. So you want to sit where you as the examiner can read the directions that are here on this side, and the student can see the test easily. Also, it is important for the examiner to understand and consider the time of day the test is administered. So whether in the morning is better for the student who has difficulty with concentration or focusing, and considering that it's after a meal. So if it's in the morning, be sure that the student had a good breakfast. If it's after lunch, that's a good time because the student will have more energy and they will have come from having an opportunity to eat lunch. As well as be sure to follow appropriate testing rules by providing a quiet room that has no distractions for the student. As the examiner, the test can be broken up. So, for example, this test assessment that was given to the 7th grader was done over a few days, and therefore during the different assessments, it was noted within test booklets the dates and then the things that were observed of the student. It's also the responsibility of the examiner to establish a good rapport with the student. If it is the initial, this is especially important to ease the student into the testing time. So as the examiner, you would have completed the identification information, but also you can explain to the student that what this test does is to see, what the student knows. So the test may have information that the student is really familiar with, or information that is really difficult, and reassure the student that that is okay, and just encourage them to do their best. Also, as the examiner, you can ask the student questions like, what is their least favorite or most difficult subject? What is a subject they really like, or a subject that comes easily for them? And ask the student about their siblings and their pets, what their siblings' grades or names are, or the names of their pets, or even depending on when the test is administered, if the student had done something fun over the weekend, or if the student had gotten a good, decent breakfast, or anything that had happened during their lunch period, just to develop a good rapport so that it's not so formulaic and robotic while administering the test. That information can be written on the front booklet. Since the examiner will be keeping the student's response booklet, that information can be written here. As well as it's important to be sure as the examiner that you have a stopwatch if necessary, which will be necessary for certain tests in the exam, and that you're following the correct procedures. So for this student, for the 7th grader, when I began with letter word identification, I went to the appropriate page, which is 27, and began at the appropriate item number, which is 49. But you must determine the starting point for the student by determining the basal and the ceiling. The basal is met when the student responds correctly to the 6 lowest numbered items. So the basal is where to start. If the student is unsuccessful, this is when you go back. And you continue once the basal is met. So for my 7th grade student, this is just an example of what took place. The basal was set at a lower number than indicated for the student's estimated grade. And because the student had done 5 of the items of the letter and word identification, but was unable to successfully complete 6, so I didn't have a successful basal. Therefore, I had to go back to a lower item number, and the student was able to complete 6 in a row, and therefore I continued. That should be marked because the student completed all of those. And then I continued back where the student was unable to successfully complete 6 consecutively. Then you continue when the basal is met. So the ceiling is met when the student responds incorrectly to 6 items. So your ceiling is when to stop. So here it's indicated in word recognition where the student continued, but there were 6 consecutively that the student was unable to complete correctly. And this is when my ceiling was met. I allowed the student to just continue here to finish at the very last one, because you just want to, have, you don't want to make the student feel as though, although they're struggling, you want them to either end on a good note or just give them the opportunity to completely finish. So the basal and ceiling are not the same for every test. It's the examiner's responsibility to review the instructions and notations. Specifically for writing samples, there won't be a necessary basal, but that information is indicated at the beginning of the test, up at the top. It will tell you if the basal or the ceiling is required, as well as if the test that you're completing is timed. So for fluency, this was timed, as well as there was no basal or ceiling that was needed, and that was indicated. The purpose of the basal and ceiling is that their requirements are to limit the number of items that are actually administered, so whether they're extremely easy or extremely difficult. For scoring and recording, be sure to pay close attention to the recording and scoring instructions for each test. For example, for the 7th grade student, the scoring directions are indicated for the letter word identification are here. So it's the number correct out of 76. Whereas for test 2, which was reading fluency for my student, you have to calculate the score through the number of correct based upon the number incorrect. So be sure to follow instructions also regarding the time limit and if scratch paper is necessary. The rubric is important in the supplemental test book to make sure the best judgments for estimates are being used to determine age and grade equivalent scoring. Also, there's examples that are provided for scoring criteria, which will enable the examiner to score the student closest to their ability and to have the most reliable score and best information. So, for example, there are writing scores in the back of in the supplemental test books and information that requires based on for these writing samples, which must have a score of 2, 1, or 0. The Woodcock-Johnson Resources has a computer program that also enables you to get the best raw score, and this allows examiners to enter the scores with the student information and provides a printout and a written letter that's important for IEP meetings and that can be included in the student file. So for my student, this sticky is protecting confidentiality. So once I entered the information into the Woodcock-Johnson Resources computer program, I was able to get a summary of my students' scores based on their Woodcock-Johnson, as well as the entire print-up of the students' scores, of their scores in all the different assessments that we did. And there were 8. The 8 mentioned at the beginning of the video were what I specifically used for the SPED 533 signature assignment, as well as you get a really awesome printout of this, of what the data meant based on the standard deviation, based off of where I want my student to be, which is initially here within this information, and based off of the data provided of my students' scores, which is a really, really great resource provided by the computer program. And then what is also important is to take this information to the school psychologist based off of the students' results of the Woodcock-Johnson. And this information can be taken to the school psychologist, and the psychologist can help in the interpretation, as well as add this information to the full report of the student. And this full report will be used at initial meetings, triennial meetings, or the review for any other academic reason the assessment may be required for the student. And that concludes this SPED 533 tutorial for appropriate administering of the Woodcock-Johnson 3rd edition assessment. Thank you.